Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the Open Concept Podcast, where we are breaking down unnecessary walls and barriers that stand in the way of greatness. Our guest today, all the way from Atlanta, joining us, Jonathan Ray. What is up, my man? How you doing?
What's up, man? I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Good. Yeah, you bet. We were having a conversation offline before we started recording, and I think we had half a podcast, and then we decided that we should actually maybe start getting some of this audio on. So that was super fun. One of the things that we were talking about, which was interesting, was clarity, and we were talking about teams and what happens if there isn't clarity on that. And you had mentioned something very interesting about the expectations that people have, or the expectations that people have of others that are misaligned if there is no clarity between team members or people that are assigned to certain tasks. Do you want to pick up where we left off and where we actually started recording? Because that was great. I love your input on what you were saying and help talk to the audience about what that thought was that was running through your mind.
Yeah, part of my background has been leading teams for years, for probably almost 20 years at this point, and I've been under a lot of amazing leaders, and I've also been under a lot of not so amazing leaders. And I think the one factor that I've seen kind of ring true in whether or not those leaders were good or bad for the team wasn't the level of clarity they brought to the expectation for each team member, as well as just laying out what it looked like to win as a team. I think many of the situations I encounter as an executive coach, in which somebody's breaking down where their team seems to be falling apart, almost always I can trace it back to a clarity issue, whether it be a expectation not laid out well, that team member doesn't know how to function correctly, or the teammates just don't know how their work plays into each other's work, or just simply that the manager or the leader has not even let the team understand what it looks like to win, to where they can go home and know that they did a good job. And I feel like so much of our satisfaction in being part of a team rests on whether or not we've been given clear guidelines on what it looks like to contribute, and then when that contribution's enough. Like most people that I talk to, where they feel like they never turn off their work and it's killing them, almost every single time there is no expectation that's been given to them, no clarity in regards to when the job is done. So it's like this eternal, like the myth of Sisyphus, like I'm just going to push the boulder up the hill forever. And it's like, yeah, of course that would suck. Of course that would be the worst experience, the worst experience for somebody who's being led by a leader that has not laid that out. And then the worst experience for me with my own boss, of just like, I'm just going to keep going until at some point we're done, and at some point you're happy. But yeah, I think that's probably the most common thread. And honestly too, whenever I'm breaking down where trust has been broken in a team, the root is almost always clarity.
You know, it was because you were talking about this, and we agreed, right? At the end of the day, people want to go home and they want to know that they have contributed to a successful day. And it's really difficult for them to understand whether or not their day has been successful or not if they don't know what that looks like, if they can't define on their own terms or based on a set of guidelines or expectations that are held for them as to what that looks like, as to what a successful day or a successful week looks like. But what's interesting is, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, those lines have to also be defined for yourself, because otherwise there's this you talk about there's a any number of things that you can do and pushing this rock uphill. And entrepreneurship often feels like you're constantly just pushing this ball uphill because there's more and more and more to do. And so what defines a successful day or a successful week or a successful year is really in the eyes of whoever is setting those terms and setting that bar for themselves. And that's been a struggle as well. I know, for certainly for myself and a lot of other business owners that I've been talking to, is just as clarity of understanding what is enough, what is not enough, what is a big win, what is a win big enough worth celebrating. If it's just if it's too small of a win and we're celebrating, then it's like, oh, maybe our standard is too low and we don't have the kind of respect, or that we need for ourselves, because we know that we could have done more and there was more left in the tank. But also this balance of, what, today was a pretty good day, and I feel like I got a lot done, and being able to go to bed knowing that, all right, tomorrow's another day, we're going to do more, but today was successful. I'm going to go home and I'm going to celebrate that. And so, having somebody, because there isn't anybody that's really on my end as the business owner, as the entrepreneur. In my experience, there hasn't been anybody that's been able to say to me, yes, hey, this is where you need to be at the end of the day. This is where you need to be at the end of the week.
Yeah.
That is 100% self-imposed. And quite often, I'm my own worst enemy. And I talk to so many business owners that share that same perspective, because
Yeah.
we were talking about family offline here. We were talking about priorities and the framework that I was sort of walking you through there. And when it comes to prioritizing, right, knowing that if you don't have those boundaries that are put up for you, you can just work forever, because there's unlimited amounts
Yep.
of things that you can
Yeah.
possibly do, and
Yeah.
unlimited amounts of things that you want to fit into your day.
100%. Yeah. Something you just said that I love. And I actually usually hesitate calling myself an executive coach, just because the term coaching is so interesting these days with the amount of courses people are putting out, and everything feels so tailored to the individual. But I often feel like, and we were mentioning this earlier, that the best systems are the ones that just like they stay true along every single different iteration,
Yeah.
regardless of industry. And something you mentioned just a second ago, I feel like is one of the core systems I teach leaders, which is that if you're finding a problem, maybe in your team, the best way to discover where the root of that is not at that level, but going up a level. So let's say you're having an issue with maybe your team having trouble executing the standards. One of the questions I would ask a leader is, do those standards exist in your work? Because you actually model the clarity that you want your team to have.
Yeah.
You don't just say it. Like, they're watching you and they're taking cues, because culture is something that is observed and then replicated. It's not something I receive through facts and figures and just through being told.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about being an entrepreneur is we actually get to be at like the ground level of where those values begin, and we get to set them. And most of the time when we come into like a salary job, there are things that are in the culture that we have no control over, that we are simply recipients of, and then we are kind of the filtration that culture and those values seeps through us into the people that are placed underneath us. But when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting your own business, you really get to author those. And many of the founders that I talk to, like when I'm sitting down with somebody who's not working a salary job or as an executive in a company, but are as a founder of their own business, a lot of times they know what they don't want more than they want in regards to the type of culture they want to create for their teams. And so a lot of the process that I walk through founders is just simply being able to articulate with clarity themselves what are the values and standards that they live by, that they find to be valuable, and then that's the foundation by which we lead other people. I don't think I'd ever been taught this in any formal setting, but a mentor of mine, I remember I would bring him like my work problems when I was in my early 20s, and he would tell me, he would be like, Jonathan, is a guy named Sean. He's been in my life, a mentor in my life since I was 17 years old. And he would say, hey, you're never going to replicate DNA that's not inside of you. So that problem that you're frustrated about, do you feel like you've solved that problem for yourself? And almost every single time I would be able to catch that I was the originator of the issue in some shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah.
And that would always kind of provide me the next steps, because I would be like, oh gosh, I need to go back and work on, am I modeling an opposite directive than I'm telling my team?
Yeah.
And
Well,
and I mean, that so many times that's the root of the problem. Once you fix that, it's amazing how things just slip into place on the team level.
yeah, you mentioned, you know, I've heard it a number of different ways. I think it was Ed Milet that I first heard the term. It's what's caught, not what's taught. And
Yeah.
I've since then heard it from a number of different people. But it's like the message is very holds very, very true, right? People do what they see modeled in front of them and what they
Yep.
pick up based on traits, body language, how whatever's spoken, versus what they're being told to do, right? It's the same thing with my kids. My oldest daughter, she's 4.5 now, and she picks up on everything. Does she do what I tell her to do? No. But does she do what I do? Absolutely. If I say,
Yep.
if I'm not careful with the language that I'm speaking, like she'll drop F bombs because she's seen dad do it, right? And she knows
Yep.
I can't tell her don't do that, but then I do it myself and then
Yeah.
have her understand, right? It needs to be modeled. And the same thing, when
Yeah.
I started packing my lunch and bringing my lunch to work every day and was eating healthy, and this is a number of years ago, but as I started modeling that and showing that this was something that I appreciate and having a conversation about the importance of why I have my lunch with me, all the things,
Yeah.
right? I can measure my macros. I know what's going in my body. I
Yep.
don't have to pack up and go and find somewhere to eat and wait in a lineup to buy some food, and I'm spending less money.
Yep.
All of these things, why they're important and why it keeps happening. When people see that, you can bet like the amount of fast food that walks through the office door is very minimal now, because they know that, or yeah, they will know that there will be some sort of judgment, whether or not I'm judging them or not. They
Yeah.
will know or feel that this is sort of out of place, and it's not
Yep.
something that is valued. So they very much catch on to that versus being told, hey, you shouldn't bring that through the door. You shouldn't be eating cheeseburgers and fries every day for lunch. They need to see that modeled. And that's a very, very important thing of any sort of leader, is being able to model what excellence looks like, or model what that culture needs to look like, or model
Yeah.
whatever standard it is that they're expressing that needs to happen. They need to be doing that as well. And in
100%.
regards to standards, I put out a little video not too long ago about the difference between standards and perfectionism. And there's a lot of people, they have this standard in their minds, especially if you're starting out in business and maybe you don't have a team yet and you're bringing on your first kind of key member, or maybe you are a seasoned member of the team and we're bringing somebody else on, but they haven't really had a lot of coaching experience, and it's just they're doing something in a way just because they've always done it, and they can't
Hmm.
really articulate why they're doing it that way, or what the outcome is if it isn't done this way, or what the upside is, what it's going to look like if it does get happen, or it sorry, losing my language here, if it does happen that way, what the
Yeah.
positive outcome is going to be. And if you can explain why something is important and very clearly give an understanding as to what those results are going to look like if it happens or if it doesn't happen, then that can become a standard. Otherwise, if it's just, I like it done this way, so just do it this way,
Yep.
or they like it this way, so just make sure that this happens, well, then that just becomes a perfectionism trait, which is really hard to scale. and it may just be a one-off thing, but it's going to be really hard to replicate over time. Whereas those standards that are set, if you can articulate that clearly, what those guidelines are, why we do them, why we don't do them,
Yep.
people will learn from
100%.
them.
Yeah. One of the ways that's been helpful for me to remember what you're saying is preferences don't scales, but values do.
Yeah.
So when you lead solely based on your preferences, the outcome of that, and I literally walked away from a job, the best job I'd ever had, this last April, because this was the team's culture, which is that the leader at the top, their preferences were the policy of the team. Every single person was trying to find their place in the preferences and expectations of that leader. And they weren't value based, they weren't standard based, they were solely preferential.
Mm.
And what I saw happen in me in that season of working that job for 5 years was it killed all creativity. It killed all innovation. It killed comfort because we were constantly like trying to vie for this person's approval, and that person became the bottleneck for all of our work.
Yeah.
And then every new idea, every new ideation session was built around like, well, we can't go there because that person, that boss is not going to want to go in that direction. So instead of being able to stress test any new idea that might lead to new innovation or make some progress for us, or lead to different outcomes, right, was always squashed because the policy of the team was this leader's preference. And I think it kind of goes back to our clarity conversation, because most of the times that preferences become king is because we as the leader don't really have any clarity around what are the actual values and standards driving our expectations. And
Yeah.
we can't even articulate them. And honestly, we don't even know them ourselves. Like the operating system of our life is on automation. Like it's not intentional at all, right? As you were talking about coming into work with your lunch, I was thinking to myself, I was like, I wonder when Brandon talks about health and macros to somebody on his team, how confident do you feel in that conversation?
I feel super confident
Right? Why?
because I understand them, and it's because it's something that's close to my heart, and it's something that I think is very important and that I value because I see the positive impact that it's played in my life.
It's a value.
It's a
Most
value.
of the times when we're and I even see this when there seems to be clarity because we have SOPs and we have manuals and we're like, you do this and you do this, but when the value or when those standards aren't a personal value, then they I don't know, they're so lackluster. Like it, when I'm passionate about something and I'm able to with clarity speak to why it's a value to me, that's infectious. People want to follow that. People
Yeah.
want to adopt that. People get excited about that. I always joke that I've never met a bad salesman when it comes to talking about their favorite movie. Like they know how to all of a sudden handle objections like a pro. Like Alex Hormozzi's like star student all of a sudden is like,
Yeah.
let me tell you why that's amazing. No, no, this is why the director used 76 millimeter film on this, right? Like all of a sudden when it comes to something we're passionate about, we can handle any objection. It doesn't tank our confidence. We're willing to like go to bat for something. And I think that when it comes to work, we somehow like divorce this like value sense, this internal value sense, because all of a sudden it becomes very self-focused. Like, what am I getting out of this? This is the right job for me. All of a sudden, all the factors kind of get far less value driven in regards to like what's good for the team and like what I believe to be true. And it becomes far more like I need to get mine. And the best leaders I've ever worked under, like that's not their driving factors. Like they have found why they're passionate about what they're doing. They're
Yeah.
able to articulate that well. And when they go home, like the things that they talk about that matter to them at work matter at home. Like those aren't different things. Um, and and yeah, I've often found when I've been a poor leader in a team context, I'm very much like paying homage to a bunch of things I claim to be important, but I really have no, like, there's no personal resonance with those ideas or those values being important to me personally.
Well, back to your movie point, right? Like the the thing that's really there and why you can talk about it so long or why you can talk about it in so much detail is because there's an immense amount of conviction behind it. And I
Yeah.
think the stronger the value, the stronger the conviction and the stronger the sale and the better the output that you're going to have. And with core values, right? If you're talking about core values in a company or in a personal life, the core values, they are not a poster on the wall that everybody walks by every single day. That matters. Core values need to be what you use to hire, to fire, to promote, decide on the types of clients you're going to work with, decide on the culture, right? What is
Mhm.
acceptable, what is not. And those core values, they should be really, really balanced against the decisions that you're making on a day-to-day basis. Otherwise, they're not real core values at all. They are just becoming those words on a wall, which is essentially just fluff and has zero impact, which
Yeah.
is the opposite of what you want to see happen when you start talking about core values and start trying to build culture around them.
Yeah, they have to drive things, right? I remember Sam Altman gave a series of lectures on being a software startup. The OpenAI CEO. I can't remember which university. I think it was his alma mater. I can't remember where he went to school, but they're on YouTube. You can go watch them. But somebody asked him about hiring people, and they said, let's say you have two candidates for a job, and one loves the company and the brand, and like resonates with the culture, but they don't have their skill set isn't up to par that the role is requiring. And the other person that's up for the hire, they knock the skill set out of the park, but they're less passionate about the company culture and the company future. And he said he had the greatest, like, most succinct answer. He said, value aligned first, skill second.
Yeah.
Those are always the trajectory of a hire. He's like, skills can be taught, but passionate about values is never going to be taught. It either resonates with the individual or it doesn't. And you're so correct in saying that those have to drive everything. And the way that you see that is like, do those things actually help you say no? Because if those things don't actually drive a no, like, no, we're not going to do that. That goes against our values. Everybody can make whatever mental gymnastics necessary to say yes to something they want. But a value is truly tested when a no is on the table. When you're like, no, that goes against our company's values. Or like you were mentioning earlier, like this clarity you've given for your team around the standards for communication with somebody that's trusting you with something like a build, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that value is like, hey, we want our clients to know that they are valued, and they're valued through clearly communicating with them. Um, when something comes up that's going to conflict with that level, that value that you have, you're going to say no to it because it's going to conflict with something that truly matters, right? And that's how you know you're actually, your growth mindset is being coached by your values, and not just like you're using your values are changing based on, or you're doing these mental gymnastics to say like, well, yes, our values this, but like, let's figure out some way mentally to make the road, all roads lead back home. Um, I think that's the true test for your organization on whether or not your values are truly leading first.
Yeah, and I think when you're setting values, right, if you're operating outside of them, there's a lot of ways, especially if you're a good salesperson, there's a lot of ways of convincing yourself for some reason, like you find you should be saying no, but you're saying yes, but it kind of loops back to like this overall vision, so that like somehow it can kind of tie back to this value over here, and that gives you some confidence in going in the direction that you're going into. But if you really ask yourself and you're honest with yourself, does this align with this value that I say is so important to me, and it doesn't,
Yeah.
then you should probably go back and perform the exercise of let's review these values and see if they still align. Because I had a gentleman on, Dr. Ken Keys. He was on one of our first episodes, and he has put together. He has a company called CRG, and they do assessments, right? Similar to the DISC assessment or the Myers-Briggs, but it's personality assessments, values assessments, leadership assessments, personality style indicators, etc. And really good, really good stuff. When we've done these personality style indicators with our entire team, and it's been wildly helpful to see how people operate under stress and how they operate under certain leadership tasks, and how they operate with under conflict. Do they run from it? Do they double down? Do they face it head on? And that really gives you a really solid way to start to navigate conversations around certain things with different people, or the types of roles that they're going to be best suited for, etc. But he said that over your core, your lifetime, from the age of and I forget the stats, I'm totally going to butcher it here, but from the age of 6 to 18 or 6 to 20, like your core values are developed very, very early on, and they only move like 6 or 7% out of alignment over the course of your entire life, which means the things that are really valuable to you at your core move very, very little. That shifts very, very little. The difference is in how they are packaged and viewed. Right. So if you say all of these things mean a lot to me, but I'm gonna package all of this up and put it under one heading that's going to be sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of unique and sort of catchy for your team, or for a way that they can remember it. That little bucket of how those standards or how those preferences are caught in that little bucket may need to be changed. But the stuff that goes into it is probably going to stay relatively the same throughout the course of a lifetime.
What would you say those things are for you?
With the company here, the way that we have packaged it up is 4 core values. So it's love it, do it, own it, and lead it. So having a passion, loving what you're doing, every single day, knowing that the love for what you do will pull you through any of the difficult times that you may have doing it, right? So it's about taking action, staying to your word, doing what you say you're going to do, showing up when you say you're going to show up, being supportive for other team members. Like, you are taking action. Owning it is taking accountability, right? If you win, it's because the team has won. If you say that you are going to do something or own a specific outcome, then you are owning that. You take full ownership of that. And as a leader, having to give ownership and having to step back, like in my perspective, if I'm telling somebody or agreeing that you are going to own this, whatever this role is, if I am stepping in anytime that there's something that's gone wrong, then I am taking ownership away from that person. And that's something that I do not want to do. I want to be able to give full ownership and let those people in those areas grow themselves. And that will only happen if they do have true ownership and leading it. As far as being a leader, I think that everybody can be a leader. There's varying degrees of leaders, but I do want everybody on our team to understand and find the power in themselves to become a leader in whatever it is that they're doing. And it's going to start off small. Maybe it's, just becoming a leader to your kids, or a coach for the kids hockey team. Maybe it's going to be a leader in your church. Maybe it's going to be a leader in business. But having the ability to lead others is super, super powerful. And I'm in this stage in my life where I want to lead others to become leaders.
I love that, man.
So those are the four buckets of core values that we look at every single year. And we went through an exercise when we started re-looking at our core values, because we just re-looked at them this year as we're going through some strategic planning for 2026, and having these questions about, okay, and the team members, right? Who do we want to be? And we had different columns, right? We start off like, who do we want to be? All right, all of these things: honorable, disciplined, excellent. We want to be the best, right? We want to be all of these great things. And we just, as a team, went through these things. And then we went to the left and we said, okay, well, who are we right now, like in this current state, balanced against who we want to be, and had an honest conversation about that. And then on the right-hand column, we had a conversation about how the market perceives us. And that was really good feedback as well. And it was awesome. There's a lot of great things. The market perceives us as like all these great things that I'm very excited about. And then there was a few things too that came on. It was like, yeah, you're probably right. Like the market maybe does perceive us in this certain way. And then trying to figure out the gaps of what needed to happen between here in the middle of who we want to be and who, like, what our North Star is, versus where we are now and where the market sees us, where others perceive us as being. And finding those nuances and filling in those gaps was really what that exercise was about.
That's awesome. I love that you guys did that. Like, that's actually fairly rare. Revisiting values and being able to articulate them, and then also stress test them around more than just like, hey, yeah, the employee manual is updated, right? Like, great. Those, we haven't changed anything, right? But being able to say like, hey, do our customers experience these values?
Yeah.
Are they leaving our doors? And then even the next step after that is like, do our employees, is there coherence between what the customer's experience of us is and then the internal family's experiences of us? When you find that sweet spot where the answer is yes, like, dude, you will be the best. Like that is so rare that when that actually happens, when you even hit like the mark 90% or 85%, you're a million miles next to your competitors, because most people they're not even coherent enough to even ask those questions. And then they're wondering like why their business isn't growing, or like why am I not getting more clients? It's like, well, because you're leading this chaotic swirl of an organization, and you're your own worst enemy. Of course you can't grow when you're holding yourself back. So I love that you guys did that. That's awesome.
Real quick before we get back to the show, if you have heard anything on this podcast that has resonated with you, or if it's helped you in any way, appreciate more than anything in the world if you could go hit that subscribe button or leave us a review. It helps us tremendously. I want to go back to being able to continue to serve and do more and more and help out and get bigger and bigger guests on, better and better. The only way that I can do that is with your help. I'm so honored to be here. Let's get back to the show. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. Well, there's a lot of information that you can gather in data in black and white, but there's a lot of magic that happens in the gray. And that those gray areas are, how do we feel that the market perceives us? Right. And that is who is it that we want to be? Who is it that we feel we are right now? Right. Those are things that happen in the gray, because there's no real data points. This is all perspective based and experience based. Right. And somebody in, a leadership position, they might think, yeah, you know what, we're doing awesome. We're, of course, we're all of these things, but there might be somebody that's on the, on the front line, or that may have a bit of a different perspective. And like, actually, you know what? I hear from a lot of customers that this is actually the feedback that we're getting, because they're getting it from a different perspective and on a different level. And so you need to have those conversations with everybody in your business to really get a true understanding of the, the average feel and the average intent that I think that that your team has. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, there's a lot of data points, right? Black and white. What was top line revenue? What was bottom line revenue? Look at our cost of goods sold. What was that looking
Yep.
at? How many Google reviews did we get? How many, likes did we get on our posts? How many followers did we get on YouTube? Whatever that is. Like, these are very black and white data driven analytics. But there's a lot of that magic that happens in the gray. And if you're walking
Yeah.
into a team, like, I'll give you an example. If you have a team and you're expecting them to produce, but you just have this feeling like they can't really produce it, even though they may feel that they can produce a project really, really well. And whatever it is, if it's going to be software, if it's AI, if it's home services, if it's in coaching, if it's a executive assistant that you've hired, whatever that is. But if you are trying to sell a service, and you, as the person who is selling the service and making all of these promises, if in the back of your mind you feel like this may be out of our team's league, or like you have any doubt at all that they can't handle it, the market will feel that.
Yeah.
And that's all. And that's just that mindset shift, whether they can or not. Like, that's that gray area where perspective and confidence comes from, based on feedback from everybody that surrounds you. And all of that feeds into how you go about acting day to day, in whether it's in business or life in general. But these little gray inputs, those are real defining factors.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Do you like music? Are you a big music fan?
I am. Yeah. Yeah, you bet.
Okay. I don't know how you feel about the band Coldplay. A lot of people rag on them, but Chris Martin of Coldplay had this amazingly insightful life lesson when somebody asked them how they choose what songs to take out of their set and what songs to include. And he says when they're playing the song, he can see in the arena, because the arena is dark, the only lit pathways are the exits. Okay.
Right.
Where you can leave the seat and go like behind the, the seating in the arena or whatever.
Yeah.
And he says, whenever I look out and I can't see the exits anymore, that's the song that people are going to get a hot dog or go to the bathroom. And he said, that's the song I take out of the set, because that's the one that people don't care to sit through. Well, I think like there's a lot of parallels to what you're saying in that principle, which is like when we actually take a moment to read the room, to read our audience, we learn a lot about ourselves. And we can either use that knowledge to like justify why this isn't, like if in Chris Martin's case, like this is an amazing song, you should like this. But our audience should be telling us something that we are humble enough to hear that leads to a change. And when your brand operates in that way, that kind of humility, your audience picks up on it, and it only makes you better. It only makes people want to work with you more. But yeah, I've always loved that Chris Martin quote. I was like, man, that's a life lesson right there.
How many kiss cams to bring out to each one of your stadium shows? Yeah, that's like, maybe we'll analyze that. Maybe there's a bit of backlash.
Totally.
One of the things I've been thinking about a lot, and I have a friend that's gone through some business challenges and was pretty down on himself. One of my most favorite people in the whole wide world. And the idea of going through a journey, going through a path of trying stuff out and going in this big circle just to end up right back in the same position where you were before, is not a journey that should be disregarded as being a failure.
Yeah.
And there's so much that can be learned in that. And I think that going through that journey just to figure out, to get right back to kind of where you were and reassess, all right, hey, that didn't work out, but I'm back here. But you know what I have is a huge, huge sense of clarity of the fact that that didn't work. And I have all of this knowledge now, which I didn't have before, and is going to allow me to continue to move forward. And I think a lot of people, they, they get caught up in not wanting to, or they're really hard on themselves because they thought that they had some clarity on where they wanted to go. And they set off in that direction and found out it wasn't exactly where they wanted to be. And now they're back thinking, okay, well, what's next? And they get really down on themselves because they thought, man, this is really where I needed to go. I spent all this time, I spent all this money going in this direction to get to this place that I was so clear on going, just to find out that I don't want to be here. This doesn't make sense anymore. But you can't get that sort of clarity on the back end unless you go through it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that's very applicable to me. So I started the business that I own back in October, and my business is called Acadia OS, but originally it was Acadia AI, and I started this AI business. I'd been in creative fields for years and years, and I love technology. I grew up in a household where my dad worked on the original radar for the F-18 Hornet,
cool.
like the aircraft, and so like my dad owned the first Mac laptop ever, and was just a geek about innovation. And so I've always been just a geek about what's being innovated in the tech space, and how does that make our life better. I've always seen technological innovation as something that should make our lives better, not something that should just add more noise. And so AI was something that I fell in love in my last role as a creative director. And when I started this business, I was like, you know what, I'm going to be an AI company and I listed out like 10 things that I did. It's like, I'm going to do this. I'll install systems. I'll create custom solutions. I'll make websites that are powered by AI. We'll do AI voice services. We'll do, we'll do education for people and enablement. And so I had all these a billion things that I wanted to do. And I started getting business immediately, because it turns out when you can do everything, you end up finding a lot of work.
Yeah. I was saying, yeah, we can do it. You want to get that done? Bring it in. Yeah, of course we can do that. Of course we can. Of course we can. Of course we can. And now what? Yeah.
100%. And in the delivery process of those projects, I found out very quickly what I didn't want to be doing. And it was pretty disheartening, because once you go down the road, I mean, it costs a lot of money to even start your own business, right? Just the little processes, and starting your own email and printing your business cards and filing with the state and figuring out like what's your tax structure going to be like. And there's all this work behind figuring out, like, implementing the direction you're moving in. And for me, like, I found myself in the beginning of, or the middle of November, saying like, whoa, I don't know if I want to be doing all of this. But honestly, I would not have learned that had I not done it. And that took me on a journey of almost refinding what I truly have been passionate about, which is helping people, man. I love helping people find that clarity. And we haven't talked about that yet, but there's a lot of things that enable clarity to be found. That's very important. You won't find it if you don't actually endeavor to find it, right? It's not just something that happens. It's a fruit of a tree, and that tree needs to be watered, and that tree has roots, right? And so I did all of these projects and things that I didn't love, and spent a ton of money to finally get to a place where the refinement of time and discomfort led to the clarity of what I want to be doing. And yeah, that you're right, that journey is never wasted. In fact, like the hero's journey that you see in almost every single movie, right? If you're like a Lord of the Rings fan, you have the hero's journey where like the hero starts off here, and then they meet a guide, and then the guide calls them to an adventure, and they meet some challenges, and they're confronted with their own need for growth, right? And this giant circle goes, but what happens is the hero reemerges back at the start for the journey to repeat themselves. The stakes change, and the hardship and difficulties change, and the problems change, but part of the hero's journey isn't a linear line, but it's a circle in which I
Yeah.
come back to the starting point. And if you get back to the starting point and you're like, why am I here again? We run the risk of actually all that you learn just being worthless because we chuck it out of frustration. But the lesson that you're learning at back at the starting point, it required all of that failure and all of those hardships, right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox because you can read all the books that you want and you know all the financial advice that you can possibly get and but until you go out and actually make some of those mistakes yourself, you're not going to figure that out. Like you can read, you know, business 101 for dummies and go out and it'll give you a breakdown of all the things like, you know, from somebody that's been through it all and they'll give you the guiding, you know, principles on what to do and what not to do because this is inevitably going to end in, you know, some sort of hellfire and but you kind of take that for you know what it is, which is a book, and you can't really learn those lessons until you go out and figure some stuff out for yourself. And the one thing that you're not going to learn from doing is inaction. The one thing
Yeah,
that you're not going to learn from or grow from is sitting and not doing anything. And
100%.
that's you know that's back to the core value one of our core values that we have here of doing it right is taking action. We may not get it right, we can but you can analyze things to death, whether you know whether it's you know the right move, whether it's the wrong move, I don't know, but at some point you're not going to figure that out until you actually do something. And you can always
Yeah,
go back and decide, all right, we tested this out, it didn't work, but you're not going
yeah,
to figure it out until you actually do something. And so it's a
yeah,
bit of a paradox because you can learn all these lessons, but sometimes the lessons that you need to learn, you can't learn from other people. You can't learn it from a book. You can't learn it from a podcast or listening. Like you can learn the some of the techniques and you can get some of the feedback, but in order to really go through something and transform, you need to get that experience. That only happens in moving forward, making a decision, having a conversation that needs to have, right? Leaning into fear, leaning into being uncomfortable, leaning into taking a chance in
oh
general.
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, so a big part of my background is playing music. I've been playing music since I was 17 years old and have had some awesome experiences in that. Like I got to play Red Rocks with Zach Bryan's band for 2 years in a row.
Hell
It
yeah,
was
that's
awesome,
yeah.
right? I've gotten to do some fun things with music. And when people ask me about stage fright, um, I'm just like, I'm not nervous to go on stage. And they want to know the strategies like, okay, so what do you tell yourself? Or, you know, how does that work? And there is no strategy. I've just done it 10,000 times.
Repetition. Yeah.
Like I don't tell myself anything before going on stage. I've just done it so many times that it's normal. Like, why is Tom Brady so freaking good in the Super Bowl? The dude's been there so many freaking times that that field does not have the same gravitas to him. He's like, I've been here, I've done this, right? And so for me, like when 2 years ago, I went out. So I was on tour with Zach Bryan for a leg of his tour,
Which is very
and
cool, by the way. That's a
yeah,
incredible experience. Yeah.
super fun. And so we were scheduled to play Red Rocks 3 years ago. It got snowed out. Okay, so then we came back the next year, and we did a two-nighter. Okay, and there was, I think, 14,000 people each night. I had zero nerves. And why? Because I've played from rooms from 5 people to thousands, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times.
Yeah.
And I've prepared. I know my parts, and that's all I needed, right? And and oftentimes, like, there's this huge gap between our knowledge and our doing. Everybody wants to like learn all the tricks of the trade, right? I feel like the most The most profitable path right now for businesses are like, let me tell you how to grow your following on Instagram or make more money or do this, do this. And everybody's buying that and consuming that. But I don't see any new people becoming these viral stars as a result of this. Is because we love to consume, but the risk and the time necessary to be a doer is just for the few, man. The few that
Mm.
actually like want to execute and are willing to put in the time and the investment. And then what happens is when your opportunity comes, you're prepared, right? Like that Abraham Lincoln quote. I think he said like you prepare for the day. You prepare for the day that your opportunity comes. Like, well, your opportunity is going to come like it's your opportunity will come, but will you
Mm.
be prepared? Like that's the question. I would much rather be prepared, right? I was thinking as you were talking about like inaction. It reminds me. I grew up in a family that like came out of the um, like hippie revival in Southern California, and so I grew up with like all that. Like my dad would read through the Gospels to us when I was a kid. I remember this parable that's always struck me is this. Jesus tells the story of this man goes on a journey and he gives three of his servants a certain amount of money, certain amount of talents, right? Like this biblical term for amount of money. And he says, "Hey, I'm going to trust this to you and then I'm going to come back." Well, you have two of them that decide to invest, and the third one decides to basically do nothing with what he's been given. And when the master comes back, the two that invested and worked and took action, there's a return and they get praised. The one who gets judged, he lost nothing. He didn't lose what he was given. He just didn't do anything with it.
And also didn't
And
gain
so
anything.
he didn't gain anything. And so the harsh ending of the parable is Jesus says that the master turns to this one and says, I'm going to take from you what you have been given. I'm going to give it to the ones who were trustworthy because you did nothing with it. And I think that should be, we oftentimes look at our lives and try to gauge the success based on the outcome. Like, what did I get? Or did I achieve that goal? And in the slow consistency of action is the win, right?
Yeah.
If you're on the journey to being healthy, the true win is not that you lost 50 pounds. It's that you took incremental actions every day and were consistent to sow into your health. That's the win. The 50 pounds lost is just an added bonus
The
of the
byproduct.
real win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk a lot about benchmarks, and I talk to a lot of people about setting baselines and benchmarks and measuring at different points. And the idea of it is like whether it's a benchmark, you have a benchmark for happiness, or you have a benchmark for finance, or you have a benchmark for you mentioned Instagram, right? Followers on Instagram, or YouTube, or whatever that is in your life. And health and fitness is a big one, right? You have this benchmark of it's 180 pounds is sort of that benchmark, but you kind of hover around that area pretty comfortably without having to do too much, without having to change too much in your life. But to set a new benchmark, it takes a massive amount of compounding effort over time to make that old ceiling your new floor. You have to do 30, 40, 50% more work to maintain that, to get to a new point where that is your new low, in order to build off of that. Because if you go out and you lose 20 pounds, somebody will go out and they'll lose 20 pounds, 30 pounds, no problem. That's easy. The challenge is maintaining that. And so many people, that's why so many people will be like, you know what, I did the thing. I lost 30 pounds. That was awesome. I can have a few cookies. I can ease off the amount that I'm working out. And pretty quickly they wonder why the scale's working its way back up, is because they measured themselves on a very specific point in the graph, where you can't measure yourself on your highest highs. You can't measure yourself on your lowest lows. You have to measure that benchmark as an average that's hopefully continuing to grow in the right direction consistently over time. And until that you're able to maintain that level of, if it's finance, if you have 10 grand in the bank or 50 grand in the bank, and you're kind of always hovering around that amount, but you want that new benchmark to be 100 grand in the bank or 50
Yeah.
grand in the bank, if it's, 10 grand, whatever that is, then you have to fight. You need to like consistently have $30,000 more in the bank than you do in order to know, like, all right, this is this new benchmark that I'm comfortable with. But it
Yeah.
takes 30%, 40% more time, 50% more time, 50% more effort than you think for a consistent amount of time, in order to really elevate that benchmark. And then you can start measuring from there. But it does take a tremendous amount of effort to reset those benchmarks because, like I said, you hit those highs in business. You have a great year. You measure yourself off of a
Yep.
banner year. You can't, rewrite your next year's budget off of this one banner year that you have. You can build a budget, but it may not be the accurate way that the next year is going to go, because you know that you've had low lows. You may have had one specific project or customer or a couple that have really set you at a a really great point on your P&L sheet, and that
Yeah.
may not come. That may not come this year. So until you can prove to yourself consistently, that only comes with repetition and these incremental steps moving forward, that you can reach these new benchmarks and confidently set and start building from that point. That's going to be tough. And you're gonna
Yeah.
win yourself a huge amount of disappointment, and you're gonna wonder what the heck happened, and you're gonna feel like you didn't have a good plan. And the fact of the matter is you just didn't put in enough time consistently to reach these new benchmarks, man.
Yeah, and I would say too, at least this is what I've discovered for me. So you tell me if I'm wrong, Brandon, if you've experienced this differently. I think it has less to do with the amount of effort and more to do with the amount of consistency of a level of effort. So I remember for me, when I really started making progress in my fitness journey back in my mid-20s, I just did it every day. Okay. So I joined a CrossFit gym. I was one of those CrossFit bros that would tell you I love CrossFit within
Yeah,
the first 10 minutes of you meeting me.
classic.
And I would just go to the class and I would do it. Now, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have the nutrition science down. I didn't have like hypertrophy science down on what's going to stimulate the maximum amount of muscle growth. I didn't have any of that knowledge. All I knew was that for 50 minutes, Monday through Friday, I was going to be going to this place and I was going to be working hard for 50 minutes out of my, so 23 hours and 10 minutes. Otherwise, I was not doing that. And just for those 50 minutes, I was working hard, and I saw a crazy amount of gains from that. And I think even as I've gotten older, had kids, and I'm in a different season of my career, I think I've put less of a value on exertion and just sprinting until I collapse from exhaustion, and I've put way more emphasis on consistency of an amount of effort that I believe to be valuable and just sticking to it.
Yeah, 100%, wholeheartedly. I agree. And you're going to go through different phases, right? And you're not going to see as many gains as quickly as you did at that point.
Yeah.
But you're going to see incremental gains that are going to allow you to play the long game. And over time, you're going to end up in a much better position down the road if you're looking at it on a macro scale than you would in the interim, right? If you're looking at how can I maximize my my muscle size and my gains over the course of this next year, that game plan is going to be very different than if you're considering, how do I stay healthy, keep my body fat percentage at a certain point, still be flexible, still have a ton of energy to play with my kids, still run a business, because I want to do this. I want to show up and I want to be consistent for the next 30, 40 years. then that game plan is going to be different. And there's going to be peaks and valleys throughout that for sure, where you're going to
100%.
try new stuff. You're going to, you're going to try the CrossFit, or you're going to get into the high rocks, or you're going to be, whatever the new fad is, because it's kind of fun, right? It's like, it's
Yeah.
entertaining. It's enjoyment. You're throwing it in there. It's a challenge. It's a new challenge, but really under all that, it's like, maybe, my goal isn't to be a high rocks champion or a CrossFit champion of the world, but it's like, I just want to have fun with fitness, and I want to be
Yeah.
able to know that I can challenge myself and show up and train. And, on competition day, I know that I'm not going to be the last one there. Like I may not end up being the first, but I'll be somewhere in the pack, and I know that I've completed it, and that's going to be fun. And for so many people, that should be the journey that they're on. For
Yeah.
the few that do want to place first, for the people that are driven and their desire to win that specific race, whether it's a marathon, whether it's um, you know championship lifting, whether it's on stage and it's bodybuilding, or it's the 100-meter sprint, whatever that is. If that goal is to be number one, that goal is very different than that person that wants to extend their life and focus on other things, because it isn't as big of a priority. So the training needs to be different.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
back to what you said, and I hope we can get into this now, is getting some clarity on what that
Yeah.
means, getting some clarity on why it's important to be number one, what you need to do, or get clarity on, is it just, I don't need to be the fastest person in the world, but I want to be able to run. I want to be able to move. I want to be able to, have the time that I can jump on the trampoline with my kids and, be healthy and be able to swing them
Yeah.
around and pick them up and do all of those things as well. But those goals are very different from each other.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping you can help us and help your audience with some tactics or some things that they can think about when they're struggling to get clarity, or things that they can do to help find clarity on the things that really matter, right? We're talking about finding these core values, finding the things that are really important to them. What would you tell any of the people that you're coaching or working with if they're struggling to find clarity for themselves, if they're struggling to find clarity for their team, if they're sort of lost and can't find this North Star that they're looking for, and they think that they know what they want, but they're not quite there? How do they tactically sit down and get clear, and in a way that they can articulate it to themselves, and in a way that they can articulate it to others?
Yeah. So I'll give you the answer, and it will it frustrates some people with the simplicity.
I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, and it's probably going to frustrate so many people, but I want to hear it anyways. This episode is sponsored by New Vision Projects, and everybody has heard the horror stories that happen. They have a friend of a friend or a neighbor that's been renovating for years on end, or they've been building a home and it just hasn't gone the way that it needed to go. Budgets are blown through the roof, timelines, forget about them. New Vision Projects has an incredibly strong track record for over 15 years of working with customers, serving them at the highest level. If you are considering building or renovating, check them out on Instagram at New Vision Projects or at newvisionprojects.com. Building the homes you want with the confidence you need. New Vision has you covered. Let them show you why they're different. Back to the show.
So you pretty much answered it in your question. You said, what would you tell somebody who is having trouble to sit down and find clarity? And my question would be, when are you sitting down? When do you have space in your life? Because the reflex that we live in, this reactionary state, is the survival mechanism of our body when we have zero margin to actually think about how we act. And so as a result, we just respond. All of our actions are response driven, right? We actually used to, and this is, I have a faith background. I worked in ministry for a long time. And there used to be this practice in ancient Christianity of actually finding silence and solitude as being a regular rhythm of life. not something you did for like a vision quest every 10 years or something that you did when, life was so hard and you're like, oh, you know what? I need to go find myself and I need to go, talk to God. And so I'm going to create this space. No, it was a regular rhythm. It was actually one of the disciplines of being in the faith was silence and solitude. Regardless of where your faith position is, silence and solitude are a fleeting commodity. And the reason they're a fleeting commodity is because we actually find in our minds that they have very little value. Because I'll fill my life with things that I perceive to be of value, right?
Mm.
If it's things, I'll avail my money towards. If it's an experience, I will make space and time for it. If it's for that job, because I want the status, I want to see senior director of so and so at that organization, I will sacrifice my time and all my energy to get. But when it comes to silence and solitude, when we think there's zero value in it, we don't do it. And I feel the same way about like health and other things like that. It's like if you actually don't value your health if you're unwilling to eat healthy and to find space to exercise. It's actually not a value for you. And so for a leader who's trying to find clarity, and I would just say as a person, because I actually believe everybody's a leader, the leadership begins with your leadership of yourself. And if you can't lead yourself, you will never be a leader of people. I often say most of the people I meet that are in leadership positions are just managers. They're not leaders. Leaders are people who have learned to lead themselves. And out of the overflow of that, they're really good at leading other people. And if you want to find clarity, you need to find space. And you need to actually find enough space with your distractions turned off to be able to hear your own thoughts enough to see and hear what matters to you. There's this great interview with Shia LaBeouf after his craziness. I don't know if you saw this on John Bernthal's. He's got a podcast called The Real Ones. And
I've seen a few of those things, but yeah.
Okay. So he had this very famous interview with Shia because it was like the first time he'd actually been re-unveiled after being canceled to planet Earth. And John gave him this platform. And he talks about learning how to pray again and learning how to find margin in his life. And he said he went to a rehab facility where they took his phone away. And he was like, I literally did not know what to do with myself. Like I would just spend my hours just scrolling. And he's like, I realized I was just feeding my ego 24/7. And he was like, the default operating system of my life was not built for space. And he's like, if they wouldn't have taken my phone away from me, I would have never found the clarity that I found. And I mean, I teach this to teenagers. So I'm like, get the phone out of your hand and just go sit someplace for an hour.
Yeah.
And when you start, don't even take a pad of paper. Get used to what it feels like to be alone with your thoughts. Get used to what it feels like to listen internally as opposed to just everything being external imposed on you. And I think that's the beginning of the journey to finding clarity. When you put that into practice, it is amazing the things that are going to come out, because oftentimes the things that are driving us aren't just even external. They're these internal values that we're unaware of that are driving everything, right? When I sit down with I sat down with this founder of a AI business the other day, and we were just going to connect, and it ended up being like a consulting call. and I didn't mean for it to be. It was free for him, so it was great. But it was awesome for me to sit back and he's like talking. I can just hear like so much confusion because I just asked this simple question. I said, "Hey, tell me about your business and like, what's it been like, and what are some of the goals you guys are pressing towards?" And he just talked for 20 minutes, and it was so hard. I could tell he was like convincing himself, swirling around, like trying to figure out, what is it that I really do well? And like, what are our goals? And we created that pause in that conversation just by asking some questions, and I just shut up for most of it. I would ask like a 5-word question, and I just think like even that can be a gift, is like taking 30 minutes to allow somebody to ask you questions, and you just see what comes out. Especially after the awkward part of, once you realize you don't know where the answer to the question, you start over talking. But it's even in that over talking that the true answer starts coming out, or the true lack thereof. And yeah, I think clarity can only be found in those spaces where we're willing to be open enough with ourselves to admit that, hey, we don't have all the answers, and I need those answers. And for me, from coming from a faith perspective, I think that like, that's where God actually meets us, is when we're willing to be we're willing to humble ourselves by not being the means by which we find all the answers. Because to me, silence and solitude is like an inherently humble place to be. It's like the absence of doing anything. Like it's the one time where we're like, I'm actually going to stop doing things. And I think that's where you start to find clarity. Once you can get to a point where that's actually integrated into your life, then there's some other things that we can do that can maybe kind of be progressive in enhancing that clarity. But that's usually the baseline. It's like, find space. If you have none, like, good luck. You're just going to borrow somebody else's clarity and pretend it's yours, because you're never going to find it.
Clarity is found in the silence you've been avoiding.
And silence is dangerous, man. Silence is a dangerous endeavor, because it will force you to deal with things you've been unwilling to deal with. It'll force you to unpack, like, why do I really slave at this job? Well, actually, I don't slave because anybody's asking me to. I'm trying to get something else out of it for me. Silence will force you to deal with those things. And that's why I say it's redemptive, because it actually will start to help you process the reasons why you do things. And that will be a healing process, even if it's a dangerous and uncomfortable process.
People don't like silence because silence feels unproductive. Right. And so when I talk to business owners, and we talk about this, and it's like, all right, well, if you want it to be productive, then just put it in your calendar. Right. It's like, if you have back-to-back activities and you're block scheduling all these things off to get productive, to do it, and like it has to happen and you have to fit it in, then put it into your calendar. Right. Whatever that is, 10 minutes of silence. And you're like, all right, cool. Now I got to check that off the list. I got to be there and got to do that. And at the end of the day, I feel like it's successful because it was on the list of things that I needed to do. Personally.
Yeah, 100%. You don't forget to eat, right? Like, you don't forget to use the bathroom. Like, you make space for the things that are essentials. And I would argue that silence and solitude is an essential to life, not just to people who are in leadership. It's very essential to people who are in leadership, but just on a base level for the human experience, silence and solitude is as important, I believe, as sleeping, eating, and using the bathroom, and all the other things that are part of the human experience. And yeah, you make space for the things that you believe to be important.
I love what you said about silence being a fleeting commodity, because it's, with technology, with our smartphones that we have in the palms of our hands, with AI, like, we don't know what's real, but there's an immense amount of anything, anywhere, right at the palm of our hands, whenever we want it, right? Instant gratification, those hits of dopamine, like, we can get them from anywhere, almost any time that we want, at any point, and for any length of time, right? Until we're totally burnt out. From the time we wake up till the time that we go to sleep. But that's, I put out a video, and it was a question about currency, right? And it was this conversation about, I think it was Elon. He had come out and he was talking about you know, in the next 6 or 7 years, cash, the currency that we use, is going to be irrelevant through ways of just digital currency, whether it's going to be
Yeah.
Bitcoin, crypto, NFTs, whatever this is. But it's like, if this currency that we're fighting for, or you know, he was talking about the idea of uh, universal high income, and this idea that people are not going to need to work, right? In 10 years,
Yeah.
people will have the option as to whether or not they want to work or not, because they will be able to receive through automation, through robotics, through this idea of like, they just won't have to work, and they will receive enough to live off of plus more. So this idea of universal high
Hmm.
income, not universal basic income, which is inevitably just going to get people by enough to survive and probably, you know, live inside of a comfort zone and not ever do anything. But it's a very dangerous game to play. But the idea of universal high income, well, if everybody is starting to make a significant amount of money with a significant low amount of effort, then then eventually that currency is going to become devalued. And so this currency that we value, if everybody has enough money in their bank account to start buying kind of whatever they need, then any sort of innovation is stopped. Any sort of hustle, any sort of drive for purpose becomes eliminated, because you've
Hmm.
started to achieve this currency that you were searching for so long, and fighting for, and spending so much time trying to obtain. So the question is, what is the new currency if our current currency that we see as
Mm.
value becomes devalued? Every single answer that I got had some aspect of time associated. It may have been time with
Mm.
family, maybe you know, time with ourself, time in silence, but all of the answers that I received back had to do with time. And so when you
Mm.
say time is a fading commodity, or silence is a fleeting commodity that we no longer have, at some point, that is really what we are going to be fighting for, is a sense of silence, a sense of solitude, and comfort in solitude, right? And people think like, oh, solitude is just, you know, the guy that lives in the woods, and he's out there by himself, and he's an outcast, and he never has anything. It's like, no, that's not actually not true. That is a form of solitude on an extreme level.
Yeah.
But having that, like the sense of you know, wealth internally, will come with some degree of obtained solitude and obtained silence that you're comfortable with, because so many people are not comfortable with that. And because, like I said earlier, right, silence is not productive in the
Yeah.
minds of so many people.
Yeah. I mean, which begs the question, like, what is productive? Like, or even what the root of kind of what Elon was saying is, where does value lie? I would argue that the people that think that silence and solitude is the least valuable thing that they could do are the ones who need it the most. Um, and I mean, there's so many. A part of my business too is using AI to help leaders actually get time back. So I have this controversial take that AI can help us become healthier human beings, mainly because it's so useful in sorting the chaos and allowing us to get time back into our lives for that margin, for the purpose. I would say the purpose is for silence and solitude and creating space and margin. But um, so many of our values, like what is productive, they're the underpinning of those things are value statements and biases that we don't even know are existing, that are the foundation for what we believe to be productive. So if I believe like my time is more productive being spent on work, on making money over spending time with friends, there's an assumption underneath that what money can bring me is more valuable than what I'm going to get over here. And the question, like I usually am trying to lead people back towards, is like, well, why is that value there? What's driving you to believe that that's where the value is. Because in that journey of self-discovery, we're going to actually learn what are the things that drive those biases. And when you finally unpack those, like, then you can start challenging them and saying, like, actually, there's not as much value there as I thought. I talked when I have a conversation. I had a friend actually worked for this family years ago. I was like a private coach for their family, and the dad of this family, he basically invented the newest hip implant and knee implant that is in existence today. And he's a genius because he not only invented it and owned the patent on the technology, he also created a second company that was the sole like distributor of this technology. This guy was making millions upon millions of dollars a month. I mean, in many ways, just by letting all the processes he invented 10 years ago just continue to work. People were still ordering, the patents were still getting the money from all this technology that he had invented a while back. And I'll tell you this, he had no less problems. And I say no less because he actually had a lot more problems than most people had less. But most people would look at somebody who's making $5-6 million a month and say, that's the life I want, because the bias that they have is that's where value lies. But our biases are all based on our experiences. And you were mentioning earlier, that individual you had earlier on the podcast, things that have happened in our life that have propped up those like ideas as being inherently valuable. And unless we like backwards engineer and give ourselves space and margin to even dig at those things and unveil those things, we may actually never prove whether or not they have value. So how many people are paying coaches thousands of dollars, and like we're in a coaching group, right? And they have all these goals. How sad would it be if all of us reached our goals and half of those people realized that those things did nothing for their life? It didn't add any more fulfillment, added zero joy, zero happiness. That would be, in like, if I'm looking at it like a novel, that would be a tragedy.
Yeah, it's back to one of the what we were talking about earlier, right? As being this idea that you can only learn that through experience, right? You can have somebody that's making $6 million a year, $100 million a year, $250 million a year, and they have they have a tremendous amount of lawsuits on their hand. They're getting sued left, right, and center. They have a few great supercars in the driveway, the big house, the big family, but any amount of pressure and problems, and they don't want any of it. And they would tell you that nobody wants their lifestyle, and nobody should trade what they have right now, their simple, easy, well, we'll call it easy life, but basic life, right? Calm, straightforward, for any amount of chaos that they have in their life. But that's one of those scenarios where you always think, okay, I hear that, but I also want to experience that for myself. And I need to experience that for myself in order to come to my own conclusion. Because in the back of my mind, I still feel that I can go and make $250 million a year and have less problems, because the problems that I have right now, that solution seems like it can solve all those problems, because you don't know what you're going to have to deal with along the way. And so again, it's one of those lessons that you can't really learn in a book. Like, you can hear it, you can hear the stories from from Elon, but Elon, himself, just because we're on that topic, where he talks about, he says, nobody wants to be me. Nobody should want to be me. Nobody could handle being me. My brain is like a storm at all times. It's all amount of chaos. Nobody should ever have to sacrifice what I am sacrificing and go through what I'm going through. Nobody should ever want to be me. But there's so many people, like so many coaches that are out there like, hey, think like Elon. This is what Elon would do. Go be Bezos. This is how all the top players make all their money. And it's like, it's probably not for most people. But that's what That's what draws attention. It's, it's clickbaity. It
Yep.
grabs a lot of people from, because it pulls them from this sense of, I am where I am. I don't like where I am. And this is kind of the
Yeah.
pinnacle of where I should be. And trying to find somewhere in between is, and trying to find that to shoot for is something that
Yeah.
most people shouldn't do. I think that there's a little of that for sure. Like, I think more and more people, there's a lot of people online and in this world that could use a little of, a little of that fire, and, get off the couch, and you should do more, and
Yeah.
you should be fighting for, what's right. And you should trying to become the best version of yourself, and always, reach your fullest potential, and you're not doing enough. And, having David Goggins yell at you down your throat, and like get you off the couch and
Yeah.
get into the gym and all that. Like, people definitely need that to some degree. But
Yes.
again, it's I think it really comes back to what you said about getting clear on what is important to you, and finding the things that are really going to support that clarity. And that clarity will change, right? Things become clearer as you move through time, and as you move
Yeah.
through experience, and as you try new things. Like you said, you may be very clear that you want to go in one direction right now. 5 years down the road, after working towards that direction, you might think, man, I've had enough. I'm not like this. This doesn't
Yeah.
resonate with me anymore. Might have been significant life changes, and that often happens to people. Things, a parent gets sick, a child gets sick, you have kids, or, you have a significant injury, or you file for
Hmm.
bankruptcy, or you go through divorce, or you get married and it's beautiful and you never thought that this was going to happen. Whatever that is, like, things do change, and all of a sudden, through your
Yeah.
experiences, through the people in your life, you've made some money. So now, fighting every day and working every day, you don't need to do that, because you've sort of achieved these goals that you wanted to achieve monetarily. So your drive changes. And I think ultimately people want to continue growing. I think fundamentally every person, there's very few people that would wake up in the morning and decide, I want to be a worse person today than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
I want to be less smart. I want to have less money. I want to have less friends than I did yesterday. So I
Yeah.
think fundamentally people do want to grow. They do want to reach their potential, and it takes leadership in oftentimes, true leadership, to help guide those people to help extract their full potential, and pave a path for them, or help them find that clarity themselves, so that they can grow. And I think people want to contribute on whatever level they can, right? People feel great when they can contribute to society, when they can contribute to their own growth, when they can contribute to other people's growth. I think fundamentally everybody wants an opportunity to grow and be better, um, and become closer and closer to the goals that they want to achieve. But that doesn't
Yeah.
happen without clarity.
Yeah. I think inherently people want to work. They just don't want to toil. Like, I think the desire to work is a good desire. Like, I don't buy this that once AI gets to a certain point, human beings are just going to get paid money and we're just going to want to do nothing. Like, people like working.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, the differentiator there is like, am I toiling away at something that I believe has no value and I'm just doing it to get a paycheck? Or am I working towards something that I find inherently valuable? Parenting is hard work, but it's valuable and it's awesome. Like, I love having little kids and I love getting to be their parent, right? A good friendship can be hard work, but it's valuable. I think, like, people like to work. I mean, even look at the hobbies that you probably have that I know I have, that we're willing to put so much work and effort and energy into. Um, that is inherently a part of what it means to be a person. We just need the clarity to be able to differentiate between, like, where am I toiling away And then like, where is that Venn diagram in my life that overlaps between like what I love and like what my goals are and what excites me and where I love to work? Because I think that's just inherently a part of what it means to be a human being. In many ways, like if I was gonna, my business is like a in so many ways like a selfish way of me forgetting to like sow my values into the world. Because what opens the door for me is talking with leaders and founders and executives about like leading better and using AI to get time back. But like my true purpose is, and it's baked into my name, my business, like the word Acadia is the word that the French used to describe Nova Scotia when they discovered it. It means the place of plenty. So for me, like what I want to be a part of is people's journey of finding the place of plenty in their lives, in their work. And most often than not, that is not tied to monetary things. It's tied to the things that we find in clarity that truly fill our cup, that oftentimes have $0 signs next to it, and have a lot more to do with like the truest forms of value in our lives, and not the transactions that we have with our work or with other people. And when we find those things, it's like, it's amazing the overflow that happens when I find that. Like when my cup is full, it overflows into how I care for my family and my loved ones. And that overflows into how I go and interact with my teammates in my job. Like the method I teach leaders is this cup saucer plate mentality. That's like, when those things live in that order and you fill the cup up and the cup's filled over, it overflows into the saucer, which overflows into the plate. But anytime we like rearrange it, we end up starving somebody else in that system. Like we either starve ourselves or we starve our loved ones. And like that's, I mean, for me, I'm like, when I think about what people need in this world and what I love, is like, I love helping people find that place of plenty for themselves, not giving them answers, because I actually try not to as a coach. I'm like, my job is not to give you the answers, because an answer given is of very little value, but an answer that you receive and find for yourselves is transformative. Um,
Principles.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, it is easy to sit here and have the conversation about focus on something that is going to pull you forward, and focus on things that you really enjoy, and focus on the things that are going to grow your fullest potential. But you can only really get there once you've solved the basic level of survival, and once you've gotten out of that, over that speed bump. Because there's so many people that are, you know, they're working in the warehouse and they hate the job, but they need to because they can't, you know, they've had
Yeah.
you know, a run of bad luck, or they're in a certain position, which like this is the best that they can do for now. And they know that they don't necessarily love it, but they are in survival mode and they need to
Yeah.
continue working to you know, feed their life. um and that's sort of one of the first things that you need to be able to get over, is like this sense of survival, this sense of food, water, shelter,
Yeah.
air, right? Once you have that, then it's like, all right, then we can start adding new desires into our life. But you need to start to achieve that first. And only afterwards, then can you start focusing on other things that um, aren't serving that base level amount
Yeah.
of survival. And you can start looking at things like, okay, well, what do I really desire?
Yeah.
What are things that are calling me, my purpose, um, and start living towards the clarity that you have for that purpose or your higher good. But yeah, man, there's a lot of people that will never have that opportunity, and
Mhm.
I'm super blessed that I've been able to create that opportunity, that I've been, you know, born in this area of, you know, Western civilization where I live. I had, you know, relatively good parents. It's a relatively, you know, safe part of the world to live
Yeah.
in. You know, it's beautiful. It's not scorching hot. It's not freezing cold. Like, you know, I wake up every day and I'm thankful for that. I have two healthy kids. that, I just knock on wood, nothing ever happens, but you never know, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful to be in the position that I am in. Um, but there's so many people that are just fighting for survival and they can't even think about their highest and
Yeah.
best potential. But I do know some of those people that are in that position, and despite them not enjoying their job, they're wonderful human beings. They have huge hearts, and they're still like quite happy. And they
Yeah.
never say anything negative. They have, they contribute in a very positive way emotionally. They're insightful. They
Yeah.
just are in a tough place themselves, but the way that they have gotten through, or the way that they're continuing to get through, is through gratitude and, for being thankful for what they do have. And I think that that's wildly commendable, and a great place to start.
Yeah, man, that tells you a lot too about those friends' values. Um, that they find a lot of worth in being grateful for what they have. My mom immigrated from Central America when she was 17, and put herself through school, night school, and worked double shifts at McDonald's. My mom would actually go through the trash, and because they would throw out all the food at the end of the night and separate out like the meat and the bread and take that home to eat with her family. And I think I learned so much growing up from a parent who endured that, and to see the resilience of hope and gratitude that kind of like transcends what what I believe to be like a debilitating circumstances. And I think oftentimes the bar that we put in place for like what that survival, like when the survival needs are no longer an issue, is oftentimes way higher than they probably are. and
Yeah, well,
and it just like I have found that for myself. I'm like, well, if I'm just here, and then I think back to like what I was making when I got married, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was making like a third
yeah.
of what I was making, and we were happy, and we still had the same problems that we had
But
making three
then it
times
comes
more.
back to a whole other story where, back to, okay, you're making $250 million a year, but all of a
Yeah.
sudden, like your benchmark for survival has increased, and now all of a sudden it's like, all right, babe, I used to make 50K a year,
Yep.
and that was, I was in survival mode then, but then now I make 100K a year, but I've increased all of my expenses to come along with that, and I haven't actually cleared up
Everything
more
costs
time.
more.
Yeah, and I'm just like, now this is my new survival benchmark. And then you start, you go in and you decide, all right, I'm going to fight for a raise, and now all of a sudden you're making 120K a year, and your expenses go up, and now you're still in survival
Yeah.
mode, and then it's 170K and you're still in survival mode, and you see that happen too, but it does come back to value, right? If you're saying you are,
Yeah.
if like you're valuing the cars in the driveway, then you're going to go out and you're going to get those cars in the
Yeah.
driveway. But it may be too early, maybe a stretch where like the cars in the driveway is now like you're surviving in that sense, versus clearing some of the time in your calendar to spend with your family, or to spend with your friends,
Oh
or to
yeah.
spend in silence, like you were talking about before. And you can fill your time and fill your calendar with a lot of stuff pretty quickly, man. Um,
Yeah.
so
Oh
you need to
yeah.
fight for some of that stuff that you love.
Dude, I don't know if you found this too for yourself as being an entrepreneur, but like when I first started my business, the flashiness of like, oh wow, there isn't a ceiling like there was in my salary job for what amount of income and amount of money I could make in a year. Like the limiting factor is me if I want to take it to this level, to this level. And as I've sat with that more, and maybe this is just like a sign of being on this side of 40 as opposed to on the other side. Um, I just have no desire for so many of those things that, like, even for the moment that they were like flashy for a second, like, oh wow, like I'm listening to this person, they own a plane, and this person owns, a $500,000 car. I'm just like, man, I don't care about that anymore. Like that doesn't drive. This is what I'd know if I got a private plane and I got in it. It would within a very short amount of time feel old. Like, yeah, okay. I still got to go to the airport, still flying a plane. It's like there's more to life than those things. And you can either learn that once you spend a decade trying to get them and you get them and you missed out maybe on a decade of accruing value that was like maybe eternal and far more significant for your life, or you can spend some time in silence and solitude and listening to other people and learning from their failures and finding enough personal clarity to see what's driving your biases. And it's amazing, like what that process will weed out of your heart and mind of like, you know what? I don't want that. And like going back to our earlier part of this conversation, like that value I've discovered in my quiet time is now driving my no. Like, I don't want to chase that. It's not really tantalizing. And oh, that person's using that to sell me on their thing. Like, I don't really want to spend my money if that's what they're offering, because that's not really what I need or want.
The
And
thing
yeah,
about
I mean,
the
yeah, that's just been a realization for me. That it's like, I don't think I'd ever process that internally. That's not what drives me.
thing about the plane, thing about the car, for most people, they don't enjoy it because they've chased that specific thing for the wrong reasons, right? If you're
Yeah,
chasing, if you want a jet for the sake of just wanting a jet, when you get the jet, you're probably going to be not so happy with the jet. But if you're getting the
yeah,
jet because your desire is to fly around the world and help as many people as possible and give speeches on different continents, and you want to light up the souls and the hearts of millions of people in your journey, and as a byproduct you require a jet to get there faster to fuel that larger purpose, then all of a sudden you're going to appreciate that jet because you know it is going to get you to your goals, your ultimate desires faster. But if your one desire lands on that jet, by the time you get it, you're going to think that that's pretty cool, but it will get tired pretty quickly.
100%, 100%. And the beauty of like what even just you said is that like you're able to do that without a jet. So all the jet might open up as more opportunities to do that thing that you really love. And then if maybe your business hits a lull where your jet card isn't as stacked as it used to be, and you got to fly first class or economy or whatever, as long as you're still getting to do that thing that you love, that you feel like this is why I was put on earth to do, it's amazing how you're able to weather those seasons with like positivity and excitement. Or, my favorite Winston Churchill quote is he said, success is going from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. If you're able to do that, it's like you have found the sweet spot. And then it's like jet or no jet, millions or thousands or hundreds. If you're always able to do what you have been put on this planet to do, because that thing doesn't require the monetary value you think it does. You can do it without any of those things, and then the monetary just adds more access. But you're still doing it with or
And
without.
back to the paradox that we were talking about. I don't own a jet yet. And you can sit here and we can talk about that jet might get tired. We might get tired having the jet. But I'm like, you know what? Let's have this conversation after I get the
After
jet.
the jet.
And after the jet, and we'll refer back
Yeah.
and we'll like, yeah, are you bored of it yet? And we'll see how that conversation goes. Until then, it's still on the vision board, and it will be, because
100%.
it's something I want to strive for, man.
There you go.
Jonathan, thanks so much for all of your time today. Where can people find you if they want to connect?
You can find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on all my socials at Jonathan David Ray, or you can go to acadiaos.com. That's ACADIAOS.com, and learn more about me there.
Awesome. Jonathan, man, thank you so much for all your time today, brother. Really appreciate you.
Brandon, I loved it. Thanks for having me. I'd love to be back, man.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do it again. We got lots more to talk about. And to all our listeners out there that are still with us, as always, here rooting for you to win. Until next time, stay blessed. Peace.
Absolutely. And Happy New Year.
Rock and roll. Happy New Year, everybody. Have a good one.